once again, welcome everyone. Today we're going to have a little bit of a chat. If you don't follow Charles Weaver on LinkedIn, please do. MSP Alliance. I sure do. And some of the things that Charles and Chris have experienced this year, we really want to kind of bring that to you all in this kind of fireside chat. So before we get started, just want to quickly just say anything we cover, we're not going to cover much from a product standpoint today. This is really not a product pitch, but of course, anything that we talk about that you could potentially be future feature or functionality here at Enable, please don't interpret that as a commitment. But we're excited that everyone's here. We're just going to go ahead and kick it off. Charles, Chris, good to see you guys. As always, I'm going to let you guys take over. We'll come back in a little bit for some Q&A and some other slides. But there you guys go. Have at it. Have a great session.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jay. It's great to be back. Great to for those of you that have been here before and heard Charles and I do our chat before. Welcome back. And for those of you that haven't, this is your first time, welcome. We thought we'd do a few introductions. I'll start. My name's Chris Massey. I'm a senior manager here at Enable. I have been here for a couple of years now working on a team we call Partner Growth, which is really built to create these, we do these business transformation programs, and we have a benchmark and some peer groups for our partners. And so we'll tell you more about that in the future. But before that, I spent 15 years at an MSP running service delivery and as well as product development. And so we were a small MSP when I started, and we were a very large MSP when I left. So it's a pleasure to be here with somebody that I really look up to, somebody that I respect. As Jay mentioned, his social media is second to none. He is a great source of truth in the security space. So Charles, why don't you give everybody an introduction about yourself?
Wow. Yeah. Thank you very much, Chris. Charles Weaver, co-founder and CEO of the MSP Alliance. I've been with the MSP Alliance for 24 years now. And for those of you who are not familiar with our work, serving about 35,000 members worldwide, chiefly what we are focused on is developing standards of best practice, certifying MSP organizations globally, and in general, trying to present the great, awesome work that MSPs all over the world do to regulators, policymakers, and anyone else who will listen. So
that's
awesome.
Awesome.
Part of the program.
Yeah, great to have you back. I tell you what, we labeled this this webinar the year 2024, the year of the MSP. And so what I thought we'd do is start with maybe a look at what you've been seeing from a trend perspective. You've had the chance to travel around really the world with MSPs or with Enable and talk to MSPs and hear what their challenges are, what their struggles are, what the trends are. We're going to pop a poll up here real quick about compliance, which is one of the topics for today. But Charles, why don't you tell us what you're seeing or like what you've seen from a trend perspective and what 2024 looks like?
Yeah, I think following up with your CEO's comments last year in Prague, where I'm paraphrasing, the MSP either looks at compliance as a headwind or the MSP looks at compliance as a tailwind, meaning it's either an expense and an obstacle or it's a business driver. I think that compliance is confusing for that reason and others for a lot of MSPs, but I would argue that the message is starting to resonate where we are seeing MSPs realize this isn't just an obstacle. This is actually a lever that I can use to force or to increase change at a managed services customer location, right? It could be internal change, adding new security. It could be taking security seriously for the first time ever. Those are the types of things, and we'll talk about how to monetize that later on. But that's where I think the large 40,000 foot view is that we're starting to see that shift in mentality, and that had to happen. And I think it's starting. The spark has been lit.
Excellent. Yeah, and as the poll just sort of reiterated, I mean, 80% of those that are in the room today are dealing with compliance as well. So it is absolutely on everybody's mind. There were two other areas that you had mentioned when we were talking about when you were traveling, and we'll get it into more detail, but I just sort of want to preface what the session is going to be about. So change management, which is something that we used to deal with a lot, Charles, in my former MSP days, there's a lack of it, right? Like that seems to be a common trend.
If we were having this conversation in 2003, everyone would look at us like we were weird. Yeah, because they would say, "Well, what do you mean change management is pretty straightforward?" Change management has now become maybe not number one, but it certainly is a very high level attack vector for a lot of bad actors, right? They're exploiting change management or lack of change management controls, and it's they're dodging and weaving their way around inside a network, and they're being quite clever about it. And so we have to be equally as clever and on our guard. So it's those kind of, the old stuff is now becoming new again, and it's really exciting to see MSPs talk about it. I know your peer groups are talking about it. I know a lot of others are talking about it. But yeah, that's one of many examples of technical kind of old school stuff that may have seemed boring, now is really critical. And if you don't know it, you're missing out.
Awesome. The last one too, and we won't go into detail here, but I'll just mention it to everybody. I see it just in about every one of the operational efficiency, the growth programs, all these different sessions, these executive sessions that we run, this gap between like knowledge of best practices and documented controls. Like there's a lot of MSPs still struggling with that. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that today as well. But let's start with the first one, Charles. Compliance was big when we talked back in Q3. It's still big. It's more important. But let me ask you, why is compliance so important to MSPs, regardless of their size?
Well, that's really it, Chris. Regardless of their size, because 20 years ago, the MSPs that said, "Hey, I'm really worried about," they would never say worried about. They would be exploiting and diving into a regulated market and doing really well. Yeah. And those were typically the more advanced, highly mature MSPs. Today, the rest of the community is finally figuring out, hey, we actually have a role to play, and we don't have to be in, a regulated market. The regulation came to our doorstep. And that really is the, kind of the other awareness or the awakening that MSPs across the world has to be aware of and say, I have a role to play. And not only a role, but a really critical role, and a role that could make a big difference for my MSP organization, but also for my managed services customers. It's just coming from everywhere. It doesn't matter if it's a general, data breach notification law or requirement, or if it's something more specific in a regulated industry. Everybody's got an opportunity when it comes to compliance.
Yeah, you hit on this earlier, and we've talked a lot about this, but what are some of the consequences of really being non-compliant or not having a compliance framework for MSPs?
The consequences, without being too overly dramatic, are becoming inconsequential, becoming irrelevant. And in this day and age, being an irrelevant MSP is not good. Most MSPs that I talk to over the years is, when they start to feel down, when they start to feel like they're lagging behind, it's almost always because they either sense or they are thinking that they're irrelevant, or they may know that they're irrelevant, but they don't know how to solve that problem.
Yeah.
Not having an opinion on compliance, regardless of what you do in your managed services or your professional BCIO, you have to have an opinion, even if the opinion is, I understand the issue, I can't help you, but I'm going to get you help. That's the role of the MSP. And if they can't count on their MSP to give them that level of guidance, then irrelevance will pretty quickly, creep in.
Gotcha. So let's talk a little bit. We love trends. We talked a little bit about what trends you were seeing. So when it relates to compliance, what sort of trends or developments are you sort of foreseeing or expecting this year, next year, going forward for MSPs?
The trend that I'm really the most happy about is the trend of the MSP really beginning to understand how the less compliant, less secure of their portfolio, including managed services and non-managed services customers, are now starting to factor more heavily into the MSP's assessment of risk. And that is really important, because for too long, the MSP has done what I think is the noble thing 20 years ago. Now it's the risky thing, which is, oh, I'm going to go the extra mile. My customer doesn't have backup of service. They got wiped out by a storm. I'm going to go and make them whole. I'm going to indemnify them because of despite their bad behavior, I'm going to help them out, which is a good thing. Today, it's a risky thing. To do anything that absolves the MSP customer of I'm not using MFA because I don't want to do it, but you're still going to protect me, right? No, those conversations are happening more and more regularly. I'm really happy to see that. I hope that trend continues. And I think,
yeah, you talked a little bit about opportunities too for MSPs to sort of capitalize on compliance. Can you share what you were thinking there?
Yeah, I mean, really, that we've been seeing a lot in the Enable community. So this is something that is definitely something that if you're tuned into the Enable partner base, there's a lot of good MSPs that use Enable products that can probably talk to their own experience. But anything from level setting on a non-certification control framework, like the NIST variation framework of CIS or CSF. You could take those and use that as a level set and start to, improve a general managed services customer and shore up any gaps, right? That's an easy no-brainer. Everybody should be able to do that. Then you have more advanced scenarios where you've got MSPs actually helping their customers through any number of different certification audit outcomes, including CMMC, SOC 2, ISO, using their own documented controls and kind of letting them flow downstream is the way I characterize it. And then the customer really sees, not only are you my MSP, but you're helping me achieve compliance. How cool is that? And the MSP makes money at it. Win-win.
That's great. You know what? I'm sure there are a lot in the webinar listening that they're already looking at compliance. They're already trying to align their service catalog to a compliance framework. They're figuring out what it would take to become certified or go through an attestation. But Charles, help those that might be on the call that really haven't started down the compliance route. What's a simple way? What's an easy way to start just figuring out which direction they should go and how they can improve their offering?
Yeah. So again, advance warning, right? The MSP Alliance for 20 years has had a control-based framework specifically built for MSPs. It was built by MSPs. That whole term that you may hear from different places, that started with us 20 years ago. It is free online to go and look at our standard and start to map things out.
Yeah.
That may be difficult for some of you. All you need is a Word document, an Excel spreadsheet, and that standard, and you can go to town. And you can start to literally piece together controls and policies and procedures and templates and stuff like that. So that stuff is all doable. I mean, anyone can go to ChatGPT or go to Microsoft Copilot and develop an information security policy. If you don't have one, after this webinar, go out there, and if you don't have a template, go to some AI engine and get it done. Those are the starting points. It doesn't have to cost you anything to do. Everyone should be doing that. Now, if you don't have the time, you don't want to do it by yourself, and you need help, MSP Alliance certainly can help. but there are other resources out there that can start to help you define, Chris, what you kind of talked about is that lack of control documentation.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that you're not doing things the right way. You have to show your work, right? To use that old math class, right? You can't just have the answer. You got to show your work and show the teacher that you got there. And that's what the world of compliance is generally wanting these days. So those are the starting points. The eventual end point is to achieve certification at an organizational level, but there is no excuse, and there's a ton of upside to just starting, kind of at the policy and the control level and go from there.
Yeah. And I'll just, speak from when I talk to some of our larger MSPs in our peer groups. They seem to rave, Charles, about the work that you guys are doing at MSP Alliance and how you're helping them out. So for those of you that haven't checked out MSP Alliance and what they're doing around compliance, definitely do that. I can tell you from experience that I've seen some MSPs really share the significance there. So it's great. Keep up the great work.
That. Yeah.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about change management, because I think this is one of those eye-opening ones, right? And let's call this section Bridging the Gap, right? So just level set here, Charles. Why is change management important for MSPs, and maybe what are some of the common misconceptions about its significance?
I'll tell you a story, and it's a story that happened hundreds, if not thousands of times, told to me by countless MSPs all over the world, and it shows the really close personal, often relationship between MSP and customer. And that would be something along the lines of the customer calls up or emails and says, hey, I need this person added as an admin onto this server. Can you please take care of this? And the MSP says, sure, why not? No ticket is created. It's maybe the owner fielded the call, and the owner calls the service manager and says, please add this user as an admin. And then it turns out that user with now administrative credentials is a consultant or is another vendor who's coming in to do some stuff outside of the purview of the MSP. And then all of a sudden, green lights start going to red or orange because they started tripping over stuff and making changes that the MSP never heard about. That was a very common thing back in the day, and it probably still happens. I hate to say it today, but that's where the bad actors come into the picture and say, I love that happening, and I'm going to exploit that. And that at the core is the role of and the responsibility of the MSP to enforce an effective but not bureaucratic change management policy for their own protection and for the protection of their managed services customers can just start to really improve security overnight by starting with the basics.
Yeah. I tell you what, there's a lot of MSPs that think it has to be this complicated process, but to your point, it doesn't. It's really about, documenting and tracking and communicating, right? I mean, I think that's a big piece of it.
I mean, I hate to say it because things with deep fake AI and the bad actors using these technologies to circumvent, controls that are in place. It has to be the way that if the MSP business owner fields a customer business owner request and said, hey, could you do me a favor? Could you do that change thing for me? The MSP has to say, happy to do it. I just need you to send in a ticket. Email this, and the business, no, I don't want to do that. No, I need you to do this, or this is not going to get done. And this is why it's so important. And here's why you're going to thank me later. Because whether it's, the common scam, we talked about it last week with some MSPs, they were talking about financial scams where they're wiring money out, right, to a bogus, fake request. That's change management too, but at a financial control level. The MSP has incredible influence and ability to force change for the better. And it starts with telling the customer, here's why this is important. Yes, you're going to have to change the way you do things a little bit, but in the end, you're going to sleep better at night, and it's going to help us keep better track of everything.
That's great. So you've already mentioned a story about a potential risk in sort of overlooking change management. But do you have any other ones, any more high profile ones? I think we talked a little bit about sort of what the past couple of years have been like about some of these breaches, right? So can you share anything about those?
Yeah. So preface, none of these involves MSPs, at least that I'm aware of. These are kind of the more, the high profile, like the MGM and Caesars that we're talking about here. I think first that's what you're alluding to.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. So these are, while they're advanced playbook scenarios come to light, actually acted out, that involve deep levels of research, right? The bad actor is already in the customer system and network. They're there for weeks, if not months, and they're just sitting around looking. They're absorbing data. They're figuring out how things are working. And by the way, some MSPs have definitely said that they have noticed customers almost have a, when they go from managed to unmanaged, the bad actors, when they start to see the MSPs go in there, they start to make some mistakes because they know that the days of free reign are over, right? The MSPs are coming in, new sheriffs in town, and it's causing some interesting after effects. But yeah, the change management is coming after the review period, right? I'm going to call it an exploitation period where they're just surveilling everything and figuring out, how am I going to do this? And then they pounce. And it's very clockwork, it's very orchestrated, and it's scary how much damage can be done in a very quick amount of time when you allow a bad actor into a network unsupervised, which brings up larger issues of EDR, NDR, and having those types of, not just a firewall, but a next generation security layered stack to help you identify that anomalous behavior inside the network, right? We're not talking about brute force penetration attacks of 15, 20 years ago. We're talking stuff that's relatively sophisticated, and then they surveil and then they act. That's a very common thing, big and small. And MSPs, I think, are pretty aware of it. I hope so.
Yeah. The other thing, too, that I think you said it earlier, right? Again, MSPs may be thinking change management is this complicated process, but it doesn't have to be. And so when you're thinking about just the ways that MSP operations work, right? Service delivery, client onboarding, technology implementation. Can you just talk about just obviously the importance, but maybe some ways that change management can be implemented during all this sort of natural, hey, I'm just going to fix this real quick and move on with my day. Can you just share just obviously the ways that MSPs could do that in sort of an easier fashion?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way to do it is to log in a ticket. I mean, I hate to be that, overly simplistic, but it's that simple. When you have, like, let's say a new vendor, like, say you onboard, all right, I'm not backing up or doing backup as a service, and I buy Cove, right? So you log a ticket. Okay, we're deploying Cove on this date. Now Cove is out there, it's being used. Maybe you're using Cove to back up your own internal MSP operations. That would be equally as important. And you start logging that. The logging in the ticket is good for a number of reasons. Number one, it's evidence. And if you ever decide to go through an organizational MSP certification, like SOC Verify or SOC 2 or ISO, you're going to be asked for those types of things. So it's evidence. Might as well start generating it at the point of the thing happening. Number two, the ticket or whatever device you happen to use is a great change management record. So you can do things like, hey, somebody asked to be added as an admin. If that comes in a level 1 help desk, you might want to have a change management policy that says that no level 1 technician can make admin level changes. Might not be a bad thing. So let's say you have that. Well, now you have a escalation and a necessary privilege change where the ticket gets escalated to somebody else to make that change. It's documented. And you can go back and do really cool performance reviews. You can, kind of after action reports and assessments on how did my MSP practice handle this change management request. There's so many really cool things that you can do that really elevate things beyond just boring change management to this is the bread and butter of what MSPs do to bring value to a customer.
Yeah, that's great, Charles. I mean, those are some easy ways for MSPs to obviously, hopefully, just continue to do what they're already doing today, and be thinking about change management. But obviously, don't forget about those bigger ones, right? Like having set review periods when we're going to make we're going to apply these patches against these 7 customers, and having a senior level review the types of patches, do that testing, and have that all documented. So then again, something goes south, you've got that all as proof that this did go through change control and was approved, and then this was the rollback plan to be able to handle that. So there's some easy ways, and then there's some more detailed ways, and I think that sets up the last part of our conversation, which is about documentation, Charles, and really the challenge that so many MSPs. I've told you I was really surprised by not only the number but also the size. It isn't just small MSPs that are struggling with this. There's medium and larger MSPs that are struggling with it as well. So, but let me ask you, how common is it to encounter that gap between the knowledge of best practices and their documented controls?
More common than you would realize or you would think. Yeah. And you're right, Chris. It's not just the small MSPs. We see very large MSPs, and it's not a badge of shame. It's sometimes this is a large value-added reseller that late in their life cycle became or adopted a managed services practice, and so it was kind of new. So, but here's where, again, you asked the point before related to like controls, documentation. You need to start someplace, and I'm going to give you some really simple. It's so stupidly simple. There's no reason not to do it. I would start with the basics. And I'm not talking just about like a lot of MSPs have run books, right? That, for how they handle more technical procedures, but I'm talking about a policy, a documentation for the moment here. Start with information security. Start with change management. Start with risk assessment. How your MSP organization handles and assesses risk on itself and on its customers. Start with, those are basics, right? In addition to your HR, which might also include like internal employee training, employee usage, rules of what employees are allowed and not allowed to do in terms of internal security, very critical. Those are the fundamentals. And if you're an MSP and you don't have one or all of those, again, go to your favorite AI engine, type in any one of those things and have it produce it for you, and then start to edit it. And there you go. And it may not be the perfect document, but it's a starting point. And if you start to work on it regularly and you realize, hey, we're doing something new for change management, let's go and update our InfoSec policy, and you realize that policy didn't really talk about change management. Let's add a new section. You're now documenting. You're actively documenting, and you are adopting or adapting to your changing environment and your growth as an MSP organization, and it's all getting put on paper or digital.
That's awesome. That's a great guide on how to bridge that gap. So for the MSPs, I'm sure folks know who you are if you've fallen into this trap and maybe you've got a gap. But for those that may not, I mean, what are some of those key indicators, Charles, that you see with MSPs that might have these, this gap between the knowledge that they have internally and those documented controls?
We generally see, Chris, two categories of MSP. One is the MSP who is new to compliance and they have very little in terms of documentation. They have never gone through any type of control identification exercise. And so it's very new. It's scary for them. It's just stay focused. And our approach is we outline a very methodical, do this. Don't think about the other 90 things you have to do. Do one thing. Start with change management. Tell me what your change management policy is. How do you do it? Describe it. All right. That's the starting point of your documentation. And guess what? You've also met, 2 or 3 change management controls that are very critical in multiple different frameworks. That's a side thing. It's getting started, and the getting started is half the battle, in my opinion.
Right.
You got to start, and then most MSPs realize, hey, that wasn't actually that bad. I had to spend some time doing it, but it's not bad. And now that I've done the work, things are a lot better. That's category 1. The other category is the more mature MSP. They've been around for a while. They do things the way they should be doing. They've got some stuff documented. They've never gone through a formal audit or certification review. And so they feel pretty good, but they know that there's going to be some gaps, and they know that they don't know where those gaps are. But they have to do this, let's say, for a customer in a regulated field. And so that's another general category we see a lot of. And they're actually more scared of finding those gaps because, they've been doing it a while. And when you do it for a while, you feel confident. And it's kind of having someone look over your shoulder and say, you got a little dust there. Maybe you should sweep up. But once they go through that, then they realize how good they were, and they have evidence, and their confidence level goes through the roof when they realize, hey, I had 2 or 3 controls I didn't have. Now I have them. My documentation's better. My stuff has been tested, and the confidence level and the ability to go out to market with that level of assurance is pretty amazing to see.
Awesome. Charles, first of all, I love the way you've categorized this, because that's exactly what I see when I'm talking to partners as well. And I actually think there's probably fewer that really haven't gotten started. There's more that have done something that, they started to document controls, but they've gone with their business, and they've all of a sudden it's like, well, we haven't touched it in a couple of years. And so can we just double click on that for a minute? Talk a little bit about ways that these MSPs obviously can ensure that what they have in place aligns, it reflects what's is sort of an up-to-date, evolving need. And then how do they address it? If they identify a half a dozen controls that, well, we've changed these 3 things and we never went back and updated in our change management policy or our cybersecurity policy, what are ways to just sort of address those things?
Okay, I'll give you one example that I've seen in the field for going back easy 20 years. I know MSPs have been doing it before then. I'd like to see more MSPs do this, but integrating compliance into your managed services practice. And I'm going to use the Mr. Miyagi method of wax on, wax off, which is, for those of you who saw the movie, the original, not the remake, the original, when he's showing, Daniel how to, paint the fence and, sand the boards and all that stuff. And, he has no clue that he's actually practicing karate. He thinks he's just, wasting time and doing manual labor for Mr. Miyagi. And then at the end, hey, you put together all these motions. I'm doing karate. Take a ticket review. Every week, every 2 weeks, every month. Should be no longer than every month. I think every week is good. Take your closed tickets and do a 30-minute, 1 hour, whatever, review with your whole NOC help desk team, and go through and say, did this technician follow protocol, follow process, follow procedure in closing out that ticket? It is one of the greatest learning tools that an MSP has. It will force adoption of good behavior. It will, and if used properly, encourage change of behavior if people are not doing things the right way. and then can become evidence of internal change management oversight, internal MSP risk oversight, and documenting your own internal ticket review is itself a control that almost all the major frameworks, including ours, would want you to have. So you incorporate it into your daily practice. When I say daily, I mean like a weekly or bi-weekly practice. You are now starting to internalize what used to be only a control that was like static and very theoretical and abstract. And now you've made it very personal, and you've made it part of your culture. And there's so many other ways that you can do this. Onboarding, offboarding, right? Users. And you can actually track those and review those. You could do, have team-based risk assessments of customers and vendors. So many different things that you can do that evidence compliance, security, awareness, security, insight. The more you do that, the more this becomes second nature, and it's not compliance you're doing, it's just running your MSP business. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great, Charles. Not only is that an excellent process to obviously identify maybe controls or documentation that's out of place, but to your point, I mean, you can correct sort of incorrect behaviors, but you can also reward sort of great behavior, right? To your original point. And I've actually seen this work really well when I was running service delivery. I mean, when larger MSPs might have a team of people that do this, like a QA department. Most MSPs don't have that luxury, and so it's usually a service delivery manager or a lead in the service desk or the help desk. But the beautiful thing is if you take some time out of your week to go through those incidents or those tickets, you can actually see, boy, you realize this you spent so much more time than you needed to on this. This is how we've documented this. So you can actually make their lives easier, right? By reviewing a lot of their documentation. And so I think that's a great great sort of process to put in place and recommend many of you guys do. So repeat the question asked on the ticket review. I just was asking if there's a way for them to, is there a way for MSPs to sort of identify out of control, out of date policies and procedures? And so Charles's feedback was to use a ticket review on a monthly basis. Speaking of that, I was just keeping an eye on the questions to make sure they were getting addressed. We are going to open it up for some Q&A. We have about 15, 20 minutes left. But as we do that, just pop your questions in the questions box there. As we do that, Jay, if you want to bring the deck back up. All right, Jay, you want to tell them a little bit about our new product that's coming around that just came out?
Yes, sir. Thanks, Chris, and just wanted to make a comment on the last topic. I worked for an MSP for many years, and we didn't do ticket management for a long time. And once we started implementing that, I would have to say it really changed the way our help desk and our NOC became more efficient. And we also implemented this framework too. But anyhow, good stuff there. So while I'm talking about this new offering, we're going to pop up a poll here real quick. But we're very excited. If you didn't see, we announced a new service offering, in an MDR offering 2 weeks ago. If you haven't heard about it, please go to /MDR on our website. But we now have the capability, no matter if you don't have a SOC today or do have a SOC, we can help you co-manage, or we could actually take over all the managed detection and response services for you. Super excited. We're really haven't been known to be in the services business, but now, we believe this is kind of that overarching layer, right, that we needed to add in our layer security story. Very excited about it. And if you want to learn more, definitely reach out to your your partner success manager or your account manager. But yeah, exciting stuff.
Excellent, Jay. All right. Go to the next slide here. Empower. So for those of you that aren't aware, Empower is right around the corner in March in beautiful Frisco, Texas. We encourage you all to attend. These are great programs. I was at Empower several different times as a customer, and now as an employee. It's great to see partners network. Empower is going to be a little bit different this year. We're still going to have all the great sort of main stage content, roadmap, talk about all the different things that we're doing. But there's a lot that MSPs can learn based upon what we've done in the operational efficiency and the business transformation programs. And so there's going to be peer cohort tracks. So when you sign up, if you're an executive, you can sign up for a sort of a CEO, CXO track. If you're a service delivery manager, you can sign up for that track or a technical lead or something. There's a technician's track that you guys are used to. Hey, how do I do this better? And then we also have a sales track. And so the beauty about this is you'll be in small sort of sections of 8 to 10 different MSPs of similar size, and you'll travel around the sort of breakout sessions with those groups so that you get to really walk away with a bunch of sort of business relationships and have conversations. And so it's going to be great. We've got some great speakers throughout the couple of days. I encourage those of you that haven't signed up already to go out and sign up after the webinar, and we'll have a link in. There's a handout in the webinar here that you can grab some details on as well. Next slide, Robert, is Jay is our Now That's It. So this is my podcast that Jay was alluding to. Just a quick plug for it. It's you guys. It's MSPs. I'm talking to MSPs about their businesses. This is not a product pitch. We are not selling anything. Matter of fact, this is sort of a self-interest of mine. I'd love to hear MSPs tell their stories of how they were founded and what challenges they've run into. So I encourage you to check that out. We've got some good questions coming in here, so I want to just wrap this up real quick. Coming up next, Jay, what do we got? There's some. I'll take this one.
You go ahead. You look at the questions, and I'll just talk a little bit. Yeah, for sure.
Sounds good. Okay.
Yep. So if you get we put in the URL for MSP Alliance there in the question. So if you haven't seen that, please go there. Also, if you don't attend our boot camps, highly recommend you attend our boot camps. Between Stephanie Hammond and Louis Pope, you will see the technical side as well as the business side of security types of sessions, right? Stephanie helps you learn how to package and price and do all those things with your layered security offering. And then Louis, of course, goes into more of a deeper dive. And then we kicked off our road shows. If you didn't attend one of those last year, I would recommend attending. Great feedback from those as well. Coming hopefully near a city near you, but go to our events page to find out both about Roadshow and Bootcamp.
Awesome. And then I think I can cover this last one, Jay. We've got a program that we normally run with the business transformation program. Oh, we don't. So there's some details in one of the handouts for we call it the business of security. Again, it's not a technical conversation. It's really about the strategies of building your security offering. We did this live in Austin, Texas last year, and it was so highly rated that we wanted to bring it to sort of the masses. And so there's some information in the handout on how to register for that. It's a limited session. It's not like a webinar where we're going to have several hundred. It's going to be an online, basically 40 or 50 people in that session. So we want it to be very interactive. We're calling it a virtual cohort, but check that out. There's some details of, it's a 5-week, 1.5 hours each week, same time, same day. So I highly recommend, for those of you that would love to be part of a virtual community like that, talking about security, love to have you there. Okay, we got some great questions. So let's start with one of the earlier ones. So, okay. So here's one from Julie. Julie asked, Charles, what questions would you ask sort of during the ticket review? Is it an interview, Charles, or is it more you're reviewing the ticket against the process?
There's a lot of ways to do it. Here's one way I think is pretty good. You have, if you're in person, it's much easier. If you're virtual, you still have everybody who's on the knock or the help desk, and they're all participating. And you take closed tickets from the last cycle. If you're doing this on a weekly basis, then you look back at the last week and you pick, again, only closed tickets. And so you randomly pick 5 or 3, depending on how much time you have. But take at least 3, but 5 could be a good number as well. And you pick those randomly, and you have someone who just grabs it. Maybe the service manager grabs those, and you bring it up, you share it on the screen, and you look for adherence to policy, right? You're specifically looking for, and start with documentation. That's a very big one. Did the technician handle the ticket and the issue, and then properly document what happened? If adequate documentation is not there, the ticket being closed doesn't mean anything, because there's probably a lot of detail that could have been in there for, review after the fact. Then you look at just proper escalation and routing of the ticket, proper review. Let's say there was an admin level change that took place. You might have a policy that says that somebody at a manager level has to review those types of changes before they take place. Did that take place? Those are the types of things that are very easy. And then you can gradually add complexity if you need to talk about how the process and the service delivery is flowing. And get as fancy as you want to be, but start with the basics. Make everyone feel involved. It's not persecution. It's everybody has a chance to learn from this and to weigh in. But it will adopt good behavior, and it will hopefully identify and correct bad behavior.
That's excellent. Thanks, Charles. I have another one from Nathan. What's the standard for creating and organizing standard operating procedures, SOPs?
Are you talking about from a service delivery standpoint?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Let's assume you meaning SOPs from a service delivery. The standard. Okay, from a documentation standpoint, the standard, whether it's cyber verified, which is based off of the MSP UCS, our standard that's been around for 20 years, whether it's SOC 2, those are the more advanced frameworks and standards out there that apply very nicely to MSPs. CMMC is great, but it is not good for assessing MSP maturity. That's a whole separate issue, but back to SOPs. It has to start with your service catalog. What managed services are you actually taking to market and delivering? And from there, your policies, your procedures, your documentation must eventually meet that service catalog portfolio, right? So if you're delivering backup as a service, then you had better have a standard operating procedure, control, and documentation set that says, this is how we deliver backup as a service. This is the vendor we use. Use your example. We use Cove. We back up data X number of times in frequency. We do test restores on an average of this cycle. And you can play around with that, right? If you have different levels of backup as a service, that's fine. But all those things go into the control level and the policy and the procedure level. And that's how I would recommend building your SOPs, because it's going to be different for every MSP, I guess. Hopefully that answers your question.
That's great, Charles. Thank you. Another one around compliance and how it relates to ITIL. How aligned with ITIL does most MSP compliance end up?
Okay. Fantastic question. ITIL has been around for ages. It came mostly from the UK and filtered its way down through Canada and eventually a little bit into the US. ITIL is a great change management help desk framework, but again, it was never designed as an MSP framework, and it is not a security framework. So from a change management help desk standpoint, it's really good. By now, most of the ITIL best practices have been, because remember, ITIL was never a control-based certification audit regimen. So when we created our standard, for example, we had to extrapolate, we had to interpret those ITIL methodologies, which we viewed at that time as kind of the gold standard for change and help desk. And we had to interpret that into the MSP business model and then infuse that with heavy stuff that was missing. So ITIL is good. Again, our standard adopts a lot of ITIL. So does the trust notices criteria for SOC 2. ISO 27001 is relatively decent at that. CMMC is relatively decent, but they approach those latter two standards really focus more on the security, and they don't really focus on service delivery. And in the end, you have to be both secure as an MSP, but you have to be good. Meaning you have to have a delicate and efficient and scalable touch. And that's tricky to do both at the same time.
Excellent. Thanks, Charles. That was a good answer. I actually was I was curious about that myself, so I appreciate you covering that. Here's another one about monetizing compliance. We talked a little bit about it for new customers. This one's specific to existing customers. So how do you monetize compliance with existing MSP customers who just see results of security audits and expect you as the MSP to fix them under the existing contract? I love this one.
That's like going to your physician and saying, I've got a few extra pounds. I'm not really fast when I run. I'm not really lifting a lot of weights, but I'm going to pay you to make me healthy. But I'm not going to change my habits, right? There's got to be some realism here. The customer has to participate in their own survival. And there's only so much that the MSP can do to tell the customer, hey, I can't protect you if you are unwilling to let us turn on multi-factor authentication, back up your data, password manage your stuff, and et cetera. And if the customer is just not willing to go there, you should be, ears wide open, hearing that and listening to that for what it is, which is the customer saying, I want you to hold all that risk. Now, if it was me, I would say, I'm not going to do that. So monetizing, there's two ways. One, take a non-certification, let's say NIST framework, and start to run every managed services customer, new and existing, and do a level set and say, we are no longer going to accept managed services customers below this threshold. You will get some project work. You might sell some hardware, some software, but you will certainly sell some managed services. And that's a real easy no-brainer. Every MSP ought to do that. More advanced. There's an MSP out of San Francisco. These guys have a Cyber Verify and they have a SOC 2. They had a customer, came to them, said, we need a SOC 2. Can you help us? MSP says, sure. MSP comes to us and says, can you help us? So now, long story, the MSP is using our framework, our tools. They're taking a managed services customer, helping them go through a SOC 2. The MSP is generating something like 40, 60 billable hours, and they're also going to benefit from the new managed services project, hardware, software to shore up gaps. Those are two easy ways. There are many other ways that you can monetize compliance, but those are easy ones that anyone could start with.
Those are great, and that's the basic one. The first one is one that I couldn't agree more. It's a conversation I have with MSPs all the time. You as sort of the liability, right? I mean, you have all the liability because you are providing support to these MSPs, and so you need to be very clear what you do and what you don't do, and you need to define what that minimum is. And so, to your point, using something like a NIST framework to set that minimum standard is beautiful, because you can go, look, this is why we're doing this. Are you going to lose a couple of customers? Possibly, but are those customers that you wanted to have? It's very unlikely that you're just going to have mass exodus if you make this. Matter of fact, we've seen MSPs go do something like that, and very quickly here, I got all this new business. To your point, I've got all this new project work. They're paying us this much more. They're actually profitable clients now. So highly, highly recommend you guys set your minimum and you make sure your partners meet those.
Works wonders on break-fix customers.
It sure does. It sure does. If you still have any of those. Awesome. All right. Well, we're at the end of our time here. There's about 1 minute. We have one more survey. Actually, the survey's down. Perfect. Guys, I want to thank you all for being part of this. Charles, I want to thank you. You are excellent again. You are a wealth of knowledge. Folks, if you aren't following Charles on LinkedIn, please check him out. Check out MSP Alliance. We linked a link to their site a couple of times in the chat there. There's a handout. Please be sure to grab. There's some details in there, a bunch of the things we shared, including a link to the Business of Security program that I'm hosting here next month. Love to see you guys at that, and love to see you at a future event. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris.